At 1:15 a.m., Brandon Swanson was still on the phone with his parents. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't running. He was calmly explaining where he thought he was. He told them he could see lights in the distance and that he was walking toward them. Then, mid-sentence, the line went silent. His parents stayed on the phone. They called his name. Brandon never answered again. That silence has lasted more than 15 years. Brandon Swanson was a 19-year-old college student from Minnesota. He wasn't known for risky behavior. He wasn't disappearing for days without warning. That night, he had been at a small gathering with friends. Nothing unusual. He planned to drive home. When his car ended up in a ditch, he did what most people would do. He called his parents. Not emergency services, not police. His parents. Because he believed it was a small problem. Something temporary. Something he could walk off. While on the phone, Brandon described his surroundings. He believed he was near a nearby town. His parents were driving toward that location while staying on the line with him. Brandon was walking through fields and gravel roads. His voice remained calm. At one point, he said he could hear water. He laughed. Nothing in his tone suggested fear. And then, suddenly, his parents heard him say one word. "Oh shit." The call didn't disconnect. Brandon simply stopped responding. His parents stayed on the phone for minutes. They called his name again and again. The line remained open. There were no sounds of movement. No footsteps. No voice. Just an open connection to nothing. When the call finally dropped, it wasn't because Brandon hung up. His phone battery had died. That moment, the silence on an open line became the last confirmed trace of him. Search teams were deployed almost immediately. Car was found exactly where he said it was. His phone was never recovered. No remains were found. No clear explanation has ever been confirmed. The terrain was searched multiple times. Dogs were used. Volunteers returned year after year. Brandon Swanson was never found. Brandon Swanson's case doesn't end with silence. It continues quietly inside other files, because when investigators look at the final minutes of similar disappearances, the same structure appears again and again. Not the same place, not the same cause, the same moment, a moment where everything still feels normal. In Brandon's case, he wasn't alone. He was actively talking to someone who loved him. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't fleeing. He was walking, describing what he saw, trying to be found. And that's what makes the ending so disturbing. The disappearance didn't interrupt panic. It interrupted normality. This exact interruption appears in other cases as well. Phone calls that don't end. They simply go quiet. Messages that stop mid-conversation. GPS signals that don't drift away. They freeze. The person doesn't vanish while escaping. They vanish while staying connected. And that creates a dangerous illusion. When someone is still on the line, people assume help is already in progress. Parents assume the call will reconnect. Friends assume the message will arrive. Authorities assume there is more time. In Brandon's case, his parents were already driving toward him. By the time the call ended, the most important window had already closed. This delay appears again and again in similar cases. The last action is so ordinary that it doesn't trigger urgency. A walk, a call, a calm voice. Nothing about the moment suggests danger, which means witnesses don't remember details. Cameras don't get reviewed immediately. Search efforts start later than they should. And when they do start, the trail is already cold. In mystery cases, people often search for a dramatic cause, an attacker, or an accident. But cases like Brandon Swanson show something more unsettling. The disappearance doesn't begin with chaos. It begins with continuity. A conversation that should have continued. A walk that should have ended at home. A night that should have closed normally. And when that continuity breaks, there is no clear point to investigate. No single second where everything obviously went wrong. Just a stretch of silence where a person used to exist. That's why these cases remain unresolved for decades. Not because nothing happened, but because whatever happened blended perfectly into normal behavior. Brandon Swanson didn't disappear in a moment of fear. He disappeared in a moment of trust. Trust that the call would stay open. Trust that help was already on the way. Trust that nothing serious could happen while he was still being heard. And that trust is the final shared detail across cases with the same ending. Brandon Swanson wasn't the first person to disappear this way, and he won't be the last. Because the most dangerous moment is not panic. It's the moment when everything still feels fine. A calm voice, an open line, and a silence that arrives without warning. Different people, same moment, same ending.